Opera for a while. Last week here in Daegu, the opera Tosca was presented in Korean, though the arias, the famous songs, were sung in the Italian. And that's a good way to do things. I think it's a shame to translate the great arias because the translation really is a mutilation. The Italians have a saying, traduttore traditore. A traditore is a traitor. A traduttore is a translator. In other words, the translator is a traitor. The translator inevitably betrays, falsifies, distorts what he or she is translating. And this, of course, is true. Especially true, I think, maybe in opera. Anyway, opera in general. Young people have problems with opera, find it boring and all that. I gave a couple of young people, last night in fact, I played a song from Tosca for a couple of 6th graders, elementary, good little kids. And I played. Okay, we're talking about opera. I was saying, last night I was telling 2 little 6th graders, great little kids, about Tosca and about opera. I have 2 pieces of advice to give any person who goes to an opera, and I wish someone had told me this many, many years ago. I've probably been to about 80 operas in my life, probably about 40 different ones. So I know, I've seen a lot of opera. I have 2 pieces of advice. 1, know the story. Read a synopsis, as we call it, or a summary of the story, so you have some idea of what is happening. If you don't know the story, I guarantee you will fall asleep. 2, take a nap. Before going to an opera, take a nap, if only 10 minutes. If you don't, I almost guarantee you will fall asleep. The lights go out, the lights are on the stage, it's so comfortable in that chair, you will fall asleep. But if you read the story, if you take a nap, that's great advice. Great. Now, opera in general. What is the attraction of opera? My life is kind of, I don't understand how it happened, but it happened early to me. No one suspected, and I didn't suspect that I would be interested in learning when I was young, and most people not either. But when I was 7 years old, I became interested in opera for some reason. I don't know why. My parents were not very interested in it, but they did have some old records lying around. And between my 7th and 9th birthday, I became really interested in opera. And so for my 8th birthday, my parents took me to the old Met in New York, and we saw Rigoletto. I fell asleep, by the way. Just exhausted, a little boy. I wish I had known then, for example, if I had taken a nap before, I wouldn't have fallen asleep. But anyway, I loved opera when I was small, and then I moved to a more sophisticated environment in northern New Jersey, and I hid my opera records and never let anyone know about it. So I was young and stupid, of course, and that's okay. And then later in college became interested again. And for me, the greatest connection has been languages. A linguist has a great advantage in opera. I do not know music really. I mean, I love music and know to recognize a lot of music, but I don't play an instrument or anything. But language means that for me to go to an opera is to get an exercise in language. And this is one reason why I would hope you would study a European language, because the people who know a European language, especially Italian, of course, will be much more interested in opera than people who don't. Sorry to talk about myself there, but that's one connection for me. Anyway, Opera is wonderful. Why is it so wonderful? Well, to begin with, the great songs are so beautiful, they make one weep. Music can make one weep. Great moments in classical music, so powerful, so deep, so inexhaustible. But opera almost carries it a step further, because in opera, of course, we have the human voice and dramatic interaction among characters and characters. An opera badly done is, I'm afraid, painful, embarrassing, but an opera well done is a high experience, I think, in this world. So it combines drama, of course, spectacle, if the setting is great, the stage settings, the costumes. If the costumes are great, what a show. The orchestra is there, and very often an operatic orchestra is even better than a symphonic orchestra, they say. Anyway, it must be very subtle, closely controlled, but inspired too. And then we get the singers. Anyway, admittedly, the plots of most operas are boring and sometimes silly and embarrassing. The biggest embarrassment is the dying aria. That is, a character gets stabbed 10 times and lives long enough to sing a long, passionate song before he dies. It's embarrassing. Drama sometimes does this too. Romeo and Juliet, for example, Mercutio's dying speech, long, a little long. Okay. Anyway, I'm going to talk a little bit about Tosca, which was presented here last week. Actually, I think it would be better to give some background of opera, historical framework, rather than talk about a specific opera. Opera began in about 1600 in Florence. Florence, the cradle of Western civilization in modern times, really, the home of the Renaissance, one of the high points in the whole world was certainly Florence in the 15th century. That's the 1400s. No modern civilization in the West can match it. And here we are, that little town of 30,000 people. Much like Athens, the 5th century BC Athens, 30,000 people, plus slaves. Anyway, Florence, just an amazing place. But by 1600, Florence had declined, certainly. But still, opera began pretty much there. The first great composer of operas, I think, was Monteverdi, Claudio Monteverdi. Early operas are hard to listen to. Only the lovers of history can listen to them with much interest, I think. But opera grew, especially we can see in Italy. But the Italians started everything. The Italians invented the Renaissance, so it's not surprising that opera began there too. Anyway, the first, what shall we say? Handel, the German who went to England and composed the Messiah. Handel composed many operas. Some of them are fairly listenable, let's say, but real opera begins with Gluck, Christoph Willibald Gluck, who was a German, and his Orfeo, as it's called, of about 1750, maybe 1760. Italian version and German version of the text. That's interesting. The music is wonderful, and I think there is still no greater opera for music alone, than Gluck's Orfeo. It is so beautiful, so much beautiful music, wonderful. The words are embarrassing. The libretto, as it's called, that's the text of an opera. That is the word, verbal text, is a libretto. The libretti, plural, of operas are almost always, as I said, embarrassing. Very few are very good. The best ones, by the way, just to say it, are the ones written for Mozart. The best libretti are certainly the ones that Lorenzo da Ponte, an Italian priest of all things, living in Vienna, wrote for Mozart. Mozart didn't write them, but that collaboration, word we used yesterday, working together between Mozart and Lorenzo da Ponte, represents the high point of opera from the point of view of the combination of beautiful music, never better, and witty, exciting, interesting language. Alas, it hasn't happened very often. So I repeat, most of the time opera goers must forgive the text, the libretto. Anyway, back to our history. Soon after Gluck, then comes Mozart, and all the composers after Gluck tried to write operas sometime or other, and many failed. Mozart's operas are still among the very best. Personally, I would put Don Giovanni in a tie at the very top of opera. Never inconceivable that something better than Don Giovanni could exist. Anyway, Don Giovanni, Le Nozze di Figaro, which means the marriage of Figaro, also at the very top. Così fan tutte, which means women are like that, cute, witty. All of these texts are witty and entertaining, wonderful. The operas of Mozart. Beethoven tried his hand, but Beethoven worked slowly, gradually, and really produced only one opera, Fidelio, in German. All along, the Germans felt a little embarrassed about writing in German. If you've ever seen the movie Amadeus, one of the very best, I think most people would agree. The Germans in the court at Vienna there, one of the Germans says, German is such a basically ugly language for opera. Opera must be in Italian, he says. And they believed it, and perhaps it's even true. In any case, the supreme language for opera is German, but there are is Italian, excuse me, but there are some good operas in other languages too. Anyway, the other king of opera, the second king of opera with Mozart, is Verdi, Giuseppe Verdi. What a man, what a great, great man. Great composer. So many great operas that really he belongs in the company with Bach and Beethoven and Mozart. Most people wouldn't put him there, I guess, but I don't know why. What a great composer. Anyway, his greatest operas, the greatest of all, along with Don Giovanni, I think, is Aida. And I'll tell you that story sometime. But the other great ones are also very great. La Traviata, just beautiful music, moving story. Rigoletto, the one I saw as a boy, one of the very best. At the end, he wrote two famous ones, Otello, which is Othello, and Falstaff, going to Shakespeare plots. But at that point, opera was kind of changing from the pattern. From early to the 20th century, the pattern was always action, dialogue, recitativo, which is talking or dialogue in tunes. Stop the action, great song. Chatter, talk, action, stop the action, great song. This pattern. Well, opera lovers love this, but it's not good drama, of course, and really it's almost funny. But the music is so beautiful that most opera lovers would not want it changed. In the 20th century, in fact, beginning with Wagner, Wagner changed everything. Now, Wagner is a phenomenon that has to be discussed separately. Here he is, a German, what a German. Starts writing operas in the 1840s, finally dies around 1880. During that time, he was seen as a king in Germany. Outside Germany, a little hard going. For one thing, Wagner wrote his own music, and he wrote the libretto. That is, he wrote the words too. Well, that's never before been done, and that was never before done, and has never been done since. So Wagner stands unique among all of them. In his early operas, kind of like the Italians, action, stop, beautiful music. Action, stop, beautiful song. But then he became impatient with that, and beginning especially with Tristan und Isolde, Tristan and Isolde, he developed a new form of opera which intended to flow and never stop. None of this embarrassing stopping for beautiful songs. Just keep going. That is, drama. He wanted better drama and more continuous, uninterrupted music. The music fused, F-U-S-E-D, merged with the words and the action more fluently, let's say. Well, most people would say, I think Tristan is a great opera. The number of people who enjoy it might be a little smaller than the number of people who admire it. Great opera, great subject, perfect for Wagner. His music is very, what should we say? People think he cheated a little bit, I think. He uses the sounds of orchestra so sensuously. He is aiming to titillate our senses, almost erotic, and Tristan is an erotic opera after all, about eroticism. Look it up. In short, Wagner is a problem. Parsifal, his last great opera, many people love. People of a religious temperament love it, but people who look more closely at Wagner wonder how this man, who really was a very obnoxious, totally unlikable man, a disgusting man in many ways, the opposite of Verdi, who was a saint. Verdi was a great, great, lovable, generous man. Wagner was a mean-spirited, deceitful, unlikable man. How this man produced this religious ecstasy, this religious orgy of Parsifal is a problem. 1873, maybe, around there. Anyway, Wagner's a problem, and then what he considered to be his crowning achievement, his Ring, Der Ring des Nibelungen, he wanted to write operas that what shall we say, immortalized Nordic values, Northern European, Germanic traditions, Germanic myth. Very few people like Siegfried or even Götterdämmerung, the last of the Ring. The first one is Rheingold, the Rhine, the gold of the Rhine. The second is Die Walküre, the Valkyries. It's hard to like these things. They're so long. They're so Wagnerian. In short, some people will claim that Wagner deserves to be at the top two, along with Verdi and Mozart, but I think, and I have tried more than most people, it's hard to put him there. Anyway, then into the 20th century. At the very turn of the 20th century, we get the last of the most famous opera writers, Puccini. And Puccini is the composer of Tosca, that I was going to talk to you about, and will sometime, which was presented here in Tegu last week. Puccini, Italian, obviously, famous for about 4 operas, really. Tosca, La Bohème, which I think is his best. Madama Butterfly, which is about, after all, the Americans in Japan. Very emotional, very sentimental, very powerful operas. And finally, Turandot. Turandot is kind of Wagnerian, that is, gets away from the that pattern that I described to you. I don't like Turandot much, not sentimental enough for me. Most lovers of opera are sentimentalists. If one is not sentimental, I think probably one will not like opera much. Because it's such an emotional experience, and should be. If it's not emotional, I think one won't like it. That may be true of music in general, but it's certainly true of opera. Anyway, probably I better, well, the 20th century, let's mention a couple. I'm not very familiar with many operas of the 20th century. The only ones I have seen that I like are Wozzeck, a German opera, hard-hitting, realism, terrible, not sentimental, but good drama, powerful. And Benjamin Britten's contributions to opera, I would think stand at the top in the 20th century. Amazing, a Brit who wrote some great operas and stayed with it, persisted. His most famous is Peter Grimes, and it's powerful. The music is great, the drama is great, it's powerful. Written probably in about 1945, or around there anyway. Since that time, I understand that operas are being composed and presented, but they're rough going, I suspect, and I can't discuss them with any authority. Maybe opera, it's a good question whether opera can survive, or whether the opera occupies the same place in culture as the museum. Are museums good or bad? They put the past in neat little boxes where we can see and admire them, and try to form some notion of beauty, A, or history, B. These big, heavy boxes that museums are. Opera, too, is kind of the past in a box, in a digestible little package. Is that bad? No. To exaggerate its importance is probably a little false, too, and that's true, too. The best that can be said is opera, like museums, I think, sharpen our sense of beauty. Without them, I wonder, can we have much of a sense of beauty? I suspect not. Then we go to the platitudes of nature, I think. Oh, that sunset, oh, that mountain, oh, that tree, oh, that flower. That's just as bad, actually, as the museum approach to beauty, maybe. I don't know. It's a hard subject. We are now on the subject of aesthetics. Rough subject, a branch of philosophy. And we're edging toward philosophy, I think, Dr. Shin and I. But for the moment, anyway, enough about opera. We'll talk in the future, as Dr. Shin wishes, about specific operas. Thank you.